Today's exercise is a continuation on a previous video where we started creating a trellis. Now this is starting over again with a different approach, and that's what you'll see at the beginning is a full video tutorial of how to create the arch trellis that has an offset. Then at the end I show a time lapse of a different iteration. If you want to download the script, go to the website capettidavid.com. There you can download it completely for free, and I post videos every week so you can learn how parametric design works. With that being said, thank you for being here, and let's jump into the tutorial. Alright, so to start, we're going to create a line segment. So we'll go here to line. We'll be creating a line segment starting with a point that has a direction and a length. So we need to create a start point. That's where I bring in construct point. This gives me a parametric point that I can plug into the start. Now let's go to direction. That will be here in the X direction. Let's go here, unit X. Now the length is going to be in the same direction. Now let's go to length, plug in 15.5. Okay. The reason why I use a 0.5 is so I can have some decimal points, and it's a little bit more subtle the way that we can extend this base line, and that's going to be where the geometry is going to be created. Okay. Let's take this and now let's move it up. So let's go to a move component. Plug in the line into the move input for geometry. Now we'll be moving that up in the Z direction. We'll copy this slider. This will be the first height. Next, we're going to be moving this one up again. So what we need to do is copy this and plug in the output of the last move into the input of the new move component, and we can now move this again up. Okay, now we're going to be using this line segment, and we'll be moving it here in the Y and Z direction. So we'll copy this, plug in the output of the geometry into the geometry input for the new move component. The move is going to be using a vector move, X, Y, Z. And this is the same thing as this, but it has all X, Y, and Z here. So now we can go in the negative Y direction and positive Z direction. We'll go positive Z and negative Y. So we'll copy that over, bring in a negative component. And now we can plug that into the vector and use the vector as the motion. So now we move it both in the negative Y and up and down in the Z direction. Now, the other thing we can do is we can change this slider to have a minimum of like -50, and that way you can offset it both inside and outside, but we'll be just making it so it offsets to one side. This. Now that we have these three line segments, we will be lofting them together. But before we do that, we want to have the ability to stretch out this top segment and also stretch out or decrease the size of this segment. And you'll see what that creates in terms of the overall form. All right, so let's just plug those into a loft component so you can see what that looks like before. And then I'll be showing you what that looks like after the fact. So let's start with the base curve. We'll plug that in first into the loft. I like to flatten the input before we bring them in because that will ensure that it comes in as one list. So now we have the first one, the second one that we moved up, this one. Holding down shift, you can add an input and you'll see that plus sign there. Let's do the same thing with the rest. Obviously, you have to put them in order. Okay. The reason why we use 2 line segments is if you only use one, you won't have control with this arc. And now that we have these 2 here, we have the ability to change the height and also change kind of like the radius of this and how far up. So we have the initial height, which is this one. Then we have the additional height. We'll just go here to 5. Now we have the overhang, which is going to be this way. And the height of the overhang. All right, now that we have those brought in here, let's get rid of that. So we don't need that. And actually we're going to be doing this again, but this time we'll be extending this and this. So we'll bring in a component called extend curve. Try that again. Extend curve. We'll be extending this one. So this curve is the input. Then we have the type, which won't necessarily be important here because they're straight line segments. Now we'll go to start. We'll go to 1.50. That'll be 1.5 feet. Now we can plug that into the start and end. Now this lets you extend this and make it larger, but it also, if we change the slider to -10, then we can actually decrease the size. And the reason why we can't see it is because the original is overlapping and we can't see it. So now we can do this with this curve, and we can do that with the curve before. So it could either be at 0, which would mean it stays the same. They could get smaller or they could get larger. And the next one will be doing the same thing. This time, we'll make sure that it just increases in size. So let's just go to 1.5 for slider. Just plug the start and end. Of course, you can have a different one for start and end, but if you want it to be evenly expanded on each side, of course, you would use the same one for the start and end. At this stage, we can loft them together. So let's bring in the loft component again. Let's flatten the input before we bring in the curves. And now let's start with the base, moving up to the middle one, 2 middle ones. Yeah, perfect. So at this stage, we can look here and we can see that if we decrease the size of the middle ones, kind of get a form change. If you keep it at 0, it keeps it extruded straight. And the top one has the overhang. Let's all right. So with this base form, now we're ready to continue and offset this to create the next portion of the structure. This would be very difficult to develop, but now we're going to be creating another one, which will make it easier in terms of structure. So let's get into it. So at this stage, we can organize this because we know what each and every component in Slider does here. The thing we need to also be aware of is now we're going to be doing this again, but moving it over to the left, but making sure that we don't do that with the top curve. So we'll be moving in the negative Y direction, all of these line segments. So let's do that. Let's go to a move component. We're going to be moving in the negative Y direction. And we'll bring in a slider. So we'll say 1.5. Now we'll start with the first one. And actually this will be positive y because it's going to go this way. We got this one. Now we're going to do the next one. Now we're going to do the next one. So all I'm doing is sliding this down, tapping Alt, and it lets me make a copy. Now I can plug in the ones that I want to move there. But this last one is actually going to be moved up. So what we need to do is take this and move it. So let's organize this. This one evens them out. This adjusts it to the left. We'll be moving again this curve, but this time not in the Y direction, but in the Z direction. Now we can use that same number. Oh, that has to be in the motion. And we can even have a different slider for that height, which is actually what I wanted to do. So now we have the same line segments that created the form before, but now we're going to be creating it again. So let's start with the first one and let's work our way up. So loft, flatten the input, start with the base and work our way up, holding down shift. All right, so now we have two surfaces that are offset and the height can vary. The reason why we want the height and this to be the same is because we're going to be doing an array. And if you mirror it and these are not even, there's going to be a gap either at the bottom or at the top. So with this, now we can continue on and disable the preview on most of this and continue on developing this into the structure that we have in mind. Now, at this stage, I would recommend having Lunchbox because that will let you have some presets that will save you some time. But also it's just useful to have because you'll use them a lot in the future. So if you can, go and download Lunchbox from Food from Rhino. And when you come back, we'll be creating the next set of subdivisions to continue on the design here. So maybe I'll do a little bit of cleanup here and then we'll continue on. For this example, I'll be using a triangulated subdivision. Here inside of Lunchbox, under panels, you'll see triangle panels B. That's what I'll be using. And so I'll plug in the first loft here, and let's plug in the number of subdivisions. They should match for the two, and I'll be creating one so I can copy it over. So let's go here to custom slider between 1, 15, and let's say 25. So let's create that custom slider here so we can plug in both U and V for the subdivisions. Actually, let's use the same for both, just for the example. Of course, we can have a different U and V subdivision here. We'll be doing the same thing for one above. Now the subdivisions will be the same. So what I did is I copied it with the slider, and you can just copy it without the slider and it will maintain the input. And now we can just change this. So that simplifies things. So sometimes when you copy, it depends what you copy that you can save a little bit of time. Otherwise you'll have to be recreating some of the sliders. This is going to be subdivisions. All right, at this stage, let's hide the loft because they're overlapping. Now we need to extract a set of points and a set of points here so we can tie them together. The way I do that is using brep or join brep. Let's type in join, brep join, and use all the panels to plug them in. Flatten the input, which means that it gives us one brep. Now we'll be using brep edges, which will let us extract the inside pattern, and we'll be extracting where they intersect with each other. So under intersect, physical, we'll go to curve, curve, and use the interior curves as both the A and B. Now we have the points as 300 here. Let's go to a cold duplicates. This will let us get rid of the points that are redundant. So let's flatten the input here. And now we have 71 points rather than the 300, because there are, where this line intersects with this one, intersects with that one, intersects with this one, there are overlapping points. This can get rid of them. And so now that we've done that for this side of the pattern, well, let's do the same thing for other side of the pattern. So I'm sliding this down, tapping Alt, and using the same, overwriting the input with the other panels. And now that we have these two sets of points, well, what we can do is create a line segment between a start and end point. And now we'll be using these points as the start and these points as the end, and they will be connecting the points between the two. So with that, we can take all of this and disable preview. Including these panels. Now we can bring back the exterior curves. Also the interior curves. And lastly, the connecting segments. So all of this is going to be put together, merging all of these sets. Now let's see what our parameters can do here. So we can still change some of this data, and it's pretty reactive, like it's acting pretty fast. And that's a positive thing, because sometimes when you start getting to the, like towards the end of the script, it starts lagging a little bit, and so it's hard to make some of the changes at the beginning to see how it reacts with the whole design. So we've made sure that it's pretty light. Now let's take the result here and let's go to multipipe, plug in the curves into the input. Now let's go to create 3 sliders. So I'll go 1.50000, make the max 2, maybe even 3. We'll just keep it at 2. We'll create 3 sliders, or this is just what I do. There are other things that we can play around with this, but this typically does a trick. The strut size, then end offset, and node size. These need to be reduced, of course, and then the strut size kind of makes the the difference here. Now these numbers up here, these two sliders, that the end offset and node size, that's going to be what changes kind of the connection. Now this changes the structure size like that. All right, so this is now ready for the next step. The next step is going to be creating an array and turning this into more of like a pavilion or installation. And also want to tell everyone that this was very much inspired from one of my viewers. We worked together on scripts. He shares his stuff with me. I share my stuff with him. And he came up with a really neat design that really inspired this next step for me. So thank you very much for those of you who are involved and want to learn more parametric design. That's the only reason why I do this. So thank you very much for being here. I'll be sharing the script, how this all came together, and we'll be doing what we did last time, which is incrementally work on a script so you can see the process from beginning to end, and we don't have to rush the entire process or move on to something completely different, so you can see kind of the workflow for an entire project. So thank you for being here once again, and I hope to see you on the next one. Go to the website, download the script for free.